Yeah, we bless the name of the Lord, God Almighty, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, for His great grace upon us, and for the strength and opportunity He has given unto us to be a worthy vessel, even to be a useful vessel in His vineyard. Like Jesus Christ Himself said, many are called, but few are chosen. But glory be to the name of the Lord that we are part of the chosen one. So today, folks, we'll continue with the series presentation on is the Quran perfect? And like you know, we've started this for quite, I think, about 3 weeks now. But we started a new series on this, and like we said, it's going to last till next year, April or May, by the grace of God. So today we have Pastor Jason Bonds with us, who is going to present and he is going to teach on um, the beginning of the revelation and the compilation of the Quran. So basically, he's going to be looking at these two generally, and so by the grace of God, he's going to dissect everything and unpack all this for every one of us. So please relax and mind you, everything Pastor Jason will be sharing will be based on the authentic Muslim sources. So you don't say, Pastor Jason says this. No, he didn't say it. Your source says this. So if you are going to hold anybody responsible, it is not Pastor Jason, it is your source, because that's what the source says. So then if you have a problem with your source, definitely you should have a problem with Islam. Definitely you should have a problem with the Quran. Then definitely you should be out of Islam after the end of this live stream by the grace of God. So Pastor Jason, welcome. Whenever you are ready, you can take over and write on with the presentation, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian Apologetics Network and ETM Apologetics. I really appreciate your invitation. It's lovely to be with you both, and I look forward to working with you in the future. It's great to be with you. And to everybody out there, and God bless you all. This talk is done with honesty. I spent many hours looking at Islamic sources before I even looked at Christian polemics. So the vast majority of what I'm about to say, as the brother said, it comes from Islamic sources. And I'm not trying to pick holes. I'm not trying to demolish Islam. I just want to look at what the Islamic sources are saying, and then we can make some deductions from that later at the end of the talk. So the first thing is we have to ask, what does the Quran teach about itself? What does the Quran teach about itself? And remarkably, there are many verses in the Quran. I'm going to mention, I don't know, about 40 verses. And then when I've mentioned the 40, we're going to home in on maybe 5 or 6 to read them, just to get a flavor of what we've read. So you need to take a pen and paper. I have sent all these verses to Brother Woody. So if you want them, I'm sure he can email you all the verses. But we're just going to go through, what does the Quran say about the Quran? So we don't straw man the Islamic position. We're not just getting it from scholars, we're getting it right from what the Quran says. So in Surah 2:2, it says that the Quran is a book with no doubt. In Surah 2:23, it says the Quran was sent down. In Surah 2:97, it says the Quran was brought down by Angel Gabriel and was then confirmed. And this is important. I'm going to come back to this. It confirms that went before it. In Surah 3, verse 3 and 4, Allah sent down the book in truth to confirm that which was before it. In Surah 4:82, it is from Allah with no inconsistencies. In Surah 5, verse 15, it is a clear book. In Surah 6, 19, the Quran is a warning. So we're getting a picture of how the Quran sees itself. It's a book of warning. It's come by Gabriel. It was sent down. It was to confirm that which went before it. These are important aspects to understand what the Quran is saying. Surah 692, it's a book, blessed book, confirms the other scriptures. Surah 7, verse 204, the Quran is to be recited and listened to, a very important text. Surah 9:6, you are to hear the word of Allah. Surah 10:1, these verses are of a wise book. Surah 10:37, the Quran could only come down from Allah and confirms other scripture before it. Surah 11, verse 1. I can't read my writing there. A book from Allah. Surah 12, verse 1. Clear verses of a book in Arabic. Again, that's a key verse. Surah 13:1. The Quran is revealed as truth. Surah 15:9. Allah revealed it as preserved it. So Allah promises to preserve the Quran. Surah 16:89. The book is a clarification, an explanation of all things. Surah 17:9. The Quran guides. Surah 18:1. Praise to Allah who sent the revealed book. Surah 21:13. Allah sent down Arabic Quran. Surah 25, verse 1. Blessed is he who sent down the criterion. So the Quran is seen as a criterion. Surah 26, verse 192 to 195. It was revealed by Gabriel. Surah 27:6 from Allah. Surah 32:2-3, a revelation of a book come from Gabriel. Surah 38:29, a blessed book. Surah 39, verse 1, a revelation of the book. Surah 42, revelation from Allah. Surah 41:2, revelation from Most Merciful. Surah 42:7, an Arabic Quran. Surah 43:2-3, a clear book made from Arabic. Surah 44, verse 2 and 3, a clear book by Allah. Surah 45, verse 2, a revelation from Allah. Surah 46, verse 2, the book from Allah. Surah 56, verse 77 to verse 80, a noble Quran. Surah 69, verse 40 to 43, it is a Quran is a word revealed, and there is no doubt of this book. Surah 72, verse 1 and 2, a wondrous Quran. 73, verse 5, a heavenly word, a heavy word revealed by Allah. Surah 75, verse 17 and 19, Allah is responsible for its recitation. Surah 76, verse 23, Allah sent down in stages the Quran. Surah 81, 19, 27, it was revelation from Allah, not human. Surah 85, I think verse 2 of...
So 21 to 22.
Yeah. A glorious Quran. And Surah 97, verse 1, a Quran revealed on the night of decree. Now, if you look at all those verses, some things come out. First thing that comes out is often when these verses are given, these are just observations that Christians we can use in apologetics, but also it's observations for Muslims and other people out there. But just looking at it objectively, I get these observations. I get about 5 observations from looking at all those verses. Number one, often when the Quran is talking about itself, it has to put in this idea that it's confirming previous scriptures. We haven't looked at all these verses that talk about the gospel, the Injil, the Torah, and that. We haven't looked at any of them. We've just looked at verses that the Quran talks about itself. And when it talks about itself, it often has to refer to other scripture and say, this Quran's been revealed and it confirms that which went before. So I'd like to look at an example of this kind of language that the Quran confirms that went before. So if you could pull up, Woody, please, brother, Surah 297.
All right, 297. Okay.
And does someone want to read it, or should I read it?
I'll read it. Say,
Yeah.
whoever is an enemy to Gabriel, it is none but he who has brought the Quran down upon your heart, O Muhammad, by permission of Allah, confirming that which was before it, and as guidance and good tidings for the believers.
And then if you look at Surah 3, verse 3 and 4.
Okay. Give me a sec. 3 to 4. Okay. It says this: He has sent down upon you, O Muhammad, the book in truth, confirming what was before it, and he revealed the Torah and the Gospel before as guidance for the people, and he revealed the Quran. Indeed, those who disbelieve in the verses of Allah will have a severe punishment, and Allah is exalted in might, the owner of retribution.
Thank you, Woody. So if you study all the verses that I've given you, multiple times when the Quran is talking about itself, it sees its identity in relation to past scripture. Whenever it's talking about itself, it can't distance itself from the past. It can't distance itself from the scriptures before. It always has to keep reminding people that this Quran has been revealed, but it confirms that which went before it. And it also claims to be in line with what went before it. That's not being polemical. It's not being a Christian trying to attack the Quran. That's how the Quran describes itself. The next thing is, this happens multiple times in the Quran. It talks about that it's an Arabic Quran. This comes up multiple times in the Quran. So, if you just one example, Surah 12, verse 1. You could read it, would you please?
Yeah. All right. So it says this: Alif Lam Ra. These are the verses of the clear book.
There should be something about Arabic there, no? Could you try a different?
What the Arabic says?
Surah 12, verse 1. Clear verses of the Arabic. That's what it should say, but never mind. If we go to Surah 20, 113.
Let me just go to Google. Surah 20, 113.
Yeah. I'll just go to this translation here. Yeah. If we just before you read that, I'll just go back to Surah 12, verse 1 and 2. It says, "These are the verses of the clear book. Indeed, we have sent it down as an Arabic Quran." In verse 2, Surah 12, verse 2. And then if we go to Surah 20, 113.
Yep.
And if you could read that, bro, please.
Okay, it says, okay. And thus we have sent it down as an Arabic Quran, and have diversified therein the warnings that perhaps they will avoid sin or it would cause them remembrance.
So often it comes up and says the Quran confirms, and it often says it's an Arabic Quran. The other one is it talks about it came from Gabriel.
Yeah,
Um, and then the other one that often it says is when it talks about itself, very often it says something within the first two verses of a surah. Often, not all the time, but very often, whenever it talks about itself, it often starts at the beginning of a surah. Often, not all the time. Sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it's at the end, but very often, like surah. If you look at Surah 72, verse 1 and 2, just an example.
yeah. 72 verse 1 2. Here. So, O Muhammad, it has been revealed to me that a group of the jinn listened and said, "Indeed, we have heard an amazing Quran." Okay.
Thank you. So if you notice there, it came right at the beginning. So often, not all the time, I'd say about 50% of the time, whenever the Quran talks about itself, it starts at the beginning, which is interesting. It's an interesting observation. So looking at all these verses, that's what I've learned is those five main points come out quite strongly in looking at all these verses without any agenda. Often the Quran wants to say it's confirming that which went before. It claims it's in clear Arabic. It claims to come from Gabriel. It makes a statement that it was given in stages, and often the statements come 50% of the time at the beginning of the surah. It claims to be a warner. It claims that you should recite it. It claims that it's a book. That's an interesting observation. It always seems to come across as a complete book. So if it was revealed in stages, why does it talk about the Quran as if it's a complete book when it hadn't been collected? So that doesn't make sense. So I'll stop there. Do you want to ask any questions, or have you got any observations or any thoughts, or do you want me to continue? Because we've got the hadith, but just looking at what the Quran says about itself, have you any thoughts about that, guys, or any critique or anything that comes to your mind? But this is what the Quran says about itself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. Yeah, we see a lot of claims that actually took place when the Quran confirms that this book is true and it will reveal. So the Quran author tells us that it seems as if it's preserved by the way it says. But even if you actually look at the Quran itself and to see the hadith and the sources, we see that it's totally a different claim. So that's really wonderful to lay out to know what does the first thing that we should lay out is what does the Quran actually says about himself and about its preservation and so on. And we're gonna test it to know whether or not it is actually true, to know if actually the Quran meet that criteria for its perfect preservation. I don't know if Christian apologetics want to add something.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to add the two of the observation that Pastor Jason talked about. The first one is he said the Quran often refer to being to confirm the previous revelations, which often is always the Torah and the Gospel. And folks, this is what I wanted to take note of in this observation. For a book that's that claims perfect preservation, and then looks for a book that its own followers claim are not perfect, then says, "Look, I come to confirm the imperfect book, but I am a perfect book." Does it make any sense at all? So the Quran um, authority, or is the Quran, how will I put it now? The Quran um, immaculate preservation had to depend on the Torah and the Injil. So because it says, "I come to confirm it," so it depends on all these two books. That's number one.
Mm.
Number two is the Quran was revealed in Arabic language. That's another observation that Pastor Jason observed. And you would want to ask yourself, why can't Allah use multiple languages in revealing the Quran? Just like the God of the Bible had to use multiple authors that speak different multiple languages in revealing the Quran. And now it is not just a coincidence that the Quran has to be in Arabic or it's revealed in Arabic. Muslim literally sees Arabic as the language of Allah. They sees Arabic as the language that Adam and Eve spoke. And they say that when we get to Al Jannah, it is this same Arabic language that we are going to speak. So therefore, they say the Arabic is the language of Allah, and they also say that Arabic also is the mother of all language. Then you have a problem. One of the problem you have is this: if Arabic is the mother of all language, then why do we have it historically that we have Latin being dated back before Arabic, came before Arabic? And mind you, the kind of Arabic that I'm referring to here is the Sabbaic Arabic, which was spoken in the Hijaz, not the Nabatean Arabic, which was spoken by Petra, Jordan, and the likes. This one was spoken down southern part, which is within the Hijaz. So you have this problem that the Quran was revealed in Arabic, had to stay in Arabic, and then the question is, didn't Allah understand any language more than the Arabic language? I mean, I think this alone destroys the perfect observation of the Quran. This is a good observation from Pastor Jason's. You can continue, sir.
So, so the thing about this is all the comments that you guys made is great but this is just coming out of Islamic sources. It's coming out of the Quran. We're not trying to trip the Quran up. We're not trying to. We're just saying what the Quran says, and when the Quran says these things, there are contradictions, there are issues, and you've spotted two of them, guys. So that's really good. But I think if you go through all these verses and study them in depth and think about them, there's a whole lot of apologetic material that we can get out of that from an apologetic polemic point of view. So that's the Quran. So that's all the verses that we looked at in the Quran. So now the second part is we look at their sources, the hadiths. So looking at the hadiths, we'll just read their sources, and then I'll bring some observations that I have on these sources, and then I'll open it up. So if we can get Bukhari chapter 1 on Revelation, Woody, please. So I'll just go through the source. Before we read the sources, I'll just tell you, like, number one, Muhammad has a revelation, and it's a ringing of a bell, and then a revelation. Then he says they have a revelation, and an angel sit next to him, and as a man. Then we see him having a revelation in dreams. He goes to a cave. He gets pressed 3 times by this so-called angel. He comes back. He's worried. He talks to his wife, Khadija. She says, "Oh, this is from God." Then she's got a cousin who's a monk, and he says, "This is from God." Then he goes again, and he comes back. He's scared. He wraps himself in a garment. Then he's told to recite by Gabriel, even though he can't read and write. And then we have this strange story. Then he meets this angel, Gabriel, who teaches him in Ramadan every night the Quran. And then we have this very long story of Heraclius, some Byzantine leader or emperor or king, who confirms Muhammad. So I've just described what we're about to read, so you don't get bogged down with the detail. So if we go to the book of Revelation, Revelation in Bukhari, you go chapter 1 and then you go to verse 2. So if you just pull it up a bit, mine's an edited version, so yeah. So I think narrated by Aisha, the mother of the faithful. I think that's it, yeah. So I'll read it. The mother of the faithful believers, Al Harith bin Hisham, asked Allah's messenger, "O Allah's messenger, how is the divine inspiration revealed to you?" Allah's messenger replied, "Sometimes it's revealed like the ringing of a bell. This form of revelation is the hardest of all. And then this state passes off, and after I have grasped what is inspired, sometimes the angel comes in the form of a man and talks to me, and I grasp whatsoever he says." Aisha added, "Verily I saw the Prophet being inspired divinely and noticed the great sweat from his forehead on a very cold day as the revelation was over." So now the next one is Surah, next one is 3. If you go down to 3, it's narrated by Aisha again, the mother of the faithful believers, and we read. This is the most significant passage here. The commencement of the divine inspiration to Allah's messenger was in the form of a righteous, good, true dreams, which came true like bright light. And then the love of seclusion was bestowed upon him. And he used to go in seclusion in the cave of Hira, where he used to worship Allah alone continuously for many nights before returning to, or his desire to see, his family. And he used to take with him the journey food for the stay, and then come back to his wife Khadijah to take his food likewise again, till suddenly the truth descended upon him while he was in the cave of Hira. The angel came to him and asked him to read. The Prophet replied, "I do not know how to read." The Prophet added, "Then the angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard that I could not bear it any more. He then released me again and asked me to read, and I replied, 'I do not know how to read.' Thereupon he caught me and pressed me a second time till I could not bear it any more. He then released me again and asked to read, but I replied, 'I do not know how to read, or what shall I read?' Thereupon he caught me for the third time and pressed me, and then released me and said, 'Read in the name of your Lord, who has created all that exists. He has created man from a clot, a piece of thick coagulated blood. Read, and your Lord is the most generous.' Then Allah's messenger returned the inspiration with his heart beating severely. Then he went to Khadijah and said, 'Cover me, cover me.' They covered him till his fear was over, and after that he told Khadijah everything that had happened, and said, 'I fear that something may happen to me.' And Khadijah replied, 'Never, by Allah, will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your kin, help the poor and the destitute, and serve your guests generously, and assist the deserving calamity ones.' Khadijah then accompanied him to her cousin Waraka bin Nuful bin Asad bin Abdul Uzza, who during the period of ignorance became a Christian and used to write the writing with the Hebrew letters. He would write the gospel in Hebrew as much as Allah wished him to write. And he was an old man and had lost his eyesight. And Khadijah said to him, 'O my cousin, listen to the story of your nephew.' Waraka asked, 'O my nephew, what have you seen?' And Allah's messenger described whatever he had seen. And Waraka said, 'This is the same who keeps the secrets, angel Jibril, whom Allah had sent to Moses. I wish I was young and could live up to the time when your people would turn you out.' Allah's messenger asked, 'Will they drive me out?' He replied in the affirmative and said, anyone, man, who came with something similar to what you have brought was treated with hostility, and if I should remain alive till the day when you will be turned out, then I would support you strongly. But after that, a few days, Warwick died, and the divine inspiration was also paused for a while. Now, there's more to it. We could read more, but to save time, he has dreams. He's wrapped in a garment, which we said. He's told to recite. And then there's a passage where it talks about he meets the angel Gabriel at the time of Ramadan, and he's taught the Quran. But then if you keep going to number 7, if you find number 7, it's the story of Heraclius, and it's told by Ibn Abbas. Yeah, that's the one. Now, in that story, he meets this his companions. This is part of the revelation, the confirmation of the Quran, that it's the revealed word of God according to the sources here, and it's a very significant story because it takes up 2, 3, 4 pages, so it's massive in the story of the revelation, which I don't think as Christian apologists we do focus on this, but this is the major plank in the defense of the Quran according to Bukhari. And it's a story where his companions go to Jerusalem and they meet this Byzantine emperor or king called Heraclius, and Heraclius asks them, is Muhammad from a good family? They say, yeah. Does he who follows him? And they say the poor follow him. And then they say, the king, the emperor or king, he says, are his followers increasing? They say, yeah. Has he ever lied? They say, no. Does he win battles? And they said, we win some, we lose some. Then they say, what does he teach you? They say, he teaches us to worship Allah. And then there's a bit where apparently they say a letter was sent by Muhammad to this emperor or king, and the emperor or king was really respecting this letter. And the letter says something like, "O people of the book, listen to what I've got to say." So that is basically, we just basically looked at a basic outline of the main sources of what the Muslims say is evidence for the revelation of the Quran. And I just want to make a few observations. The first observation is the reliability of the hadith. It's questionable how reliable the hadiths are because, for example, the Quran says that Muhammad did not do miracles, and yet the hadiths say that he did. So that's just telling you, and one example, how the hadiths were invented later. So how much we can rely on these hadiths. The other one is verisimilitude. When you read the Gospels have verisimilitude, that is background information. When you read about Jerusalem in the Gospel of John, it tells you where the gates are, the pools are. When you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they tell you the different places in Galilee, the hills, the mountains, the pathways, lots of different things that you know that these people lived in the time of Jesus and they knew what they're writing about. You don't get any background information in these stories. You don't get any detail. They're very general, showing you they're not really rooted in history. So it's verisimilitude, background material. And then the other one is, I'm just trying to think what the other one was, is if you remember the story where Muhammad was squeezed and he was told to read. This is done 3 times. And if you read the Gnostic Gospels, the Gnostic Gospel literature, they always have always repeat themselves 3 times. And the reason why they do that is because our writers were inspired of God and they were very creative. But if you're not inspired of God, you're not creative. You're kind of repetitious. You're kind of boring. And so if you read the Gnostic Gospel, they're very boring. They're very repetitious. And you can see in this story, it has a very Gnostic style. So I doubt the historical reliability of some of this material. It's very difficult to know what's true. It's no background information. It's very repetitive. So yeah. So one final observation for me is the authority of Muhammad. He's given authority for his revelation based on 3 people. Number 1, his wife. Number 2, the monk. And number 3, this Byzantine emperor, so-called. So we're to believe that he's a prophet being given this revelation because his wife said he was a good man. Because this monk, notice, again, they need the Bible to confirm the Quran. It's a monk who knew Hebrew and translated the Gospels in Hebrew. Notice the emperor, when he receives a letter from Muhammad, Muhammad in the letter, so-called, says, "O people of the book." So Muhammad is confirmed as a prophet based on not John the Baptist, not the Old Testament prophets. He's seen as a prophet because Khadijah says, "Oh, you're a good man." The monk says, "Oh, the revelation that you had, it was Angel Gabriel." And apparently from this emperor, which we don't have any documentation, we don't have any evidence. So that's my observation from, this is the sources. My view of all these sources is this is not evidence in any shape or form to show that the Quran has been revealed from God. There's contradictions here. There's no real authority here. It's not coming in line with the prophets of the Old Testament or Jesus or the apostles. It's got no historical background to prove that it's correct. And these hadiths cannot be relied upon. Many of them are inventions of later. So what is true here and what is not true is very difficult to discern historically. So that's the hadith. So if you got any questions or thoughts or criticisms of this source material?
That shows us where Watakar bin Nofel, he was known as a monk, and he convinced Muhammad, that his nephew, that it was angel who appears to you the same way how he appears to Moses. When we actually read the Torah, did the angel Gabriel actually appear to Moses?
Great, yeah.
So, like, that just shows us, like, we see even people who claim to be Christians, they turn out to be liberals. Well, Waraka, I don't think that he was even a Christian, because if you actually read the scriptures, you know it was not even it was not just an angel. It was the angel of the Lord that appears to Moses and claims to be the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And second point, when Waraka says the angel appears to you the same way he appears to Muhammad, I would ask this question: show me any evidence in the entire Old and New Testament when the angel appears to someone, the angel squeezes them forcefully 3 times until they want to kill themselves. That actually happens to Muhammad 3 times forcefully, and he says, "Read," and he says, "I do not know how to read." And what did the angel do? The angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard I cannot bear it anymore. Which angel would do that to a prophet? Daniel? Which angel would do that to Mary? Which angel would do that to Moses or Jeremiah? Which one would do that? Even the Lord. Because I know the Muslim objection, what they would say is that, well, When the angels appear to prophets, they will be afraid. Yeah, and when they're afraid, what actually happens? There will be a comfort. Do not be afraid. But that's not what we see with Muhammad. So we see two different things. Just in of itself, when we see that source, yeah, it's a red flag. Because if Muhammad claimed to be like the previous prophets, and their encounter is two different things, then we could say that does the angel Gabriel act like how he acted with Muhammad? No, that's not the real angel Gabriel. So we see what actually happened. Satan in disguise.
Mm.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. Uh, but there's another observation that I think I need to speak out on. You see, uh, like if you've experienced something before, like if I have seen an angel before, and then I didn't later on see an angel, I don't think I need to go and look for somebody else to tell me what I've seen is an angel. Take for instance, when Samuel heard the voice of the Lord the first time in his entire life when he was so young, he never knew this was the voice of God. So he had to run to Eli to say, did you call me? Then when Eli perceived that Samuel was being called by God, then Eli told him what to do. That's an example of somebody that had a first time experience. But Muhammad, this was not the first time, this was not the first experience that Muhammad had of an angel encounter. We know from the source from the sources, Muslim sources and hadiths, that Muhammad had an encounter with an angel that they saw his heart opened. Those angels, they saw his heart open, and then they brought out every kind of unclean thing out of his heart. Okay, so now this man already had an encounter with an angel, so he knows how it looks like. He knows he have that experience, so he does not need to wear a car to explain to him who he saw. But for the fact that he then had a second experience of an angel, and for him not to be able to identify that these are angel or this is an angel, then it shows that what he has seen is not an angel. Because when you already had an experience of this before, so why then should you see this same angel or this same personality, and then you are unable to know that this is an angel? It means that the person you've seen or the being you saw is definitely not an angel, and so you need Waraka to tell you, oh, this is an angel. It was not until Waraka tell you, okay, this man who you saw is an angel. Not until then they didn't know, okay, you've seen an angel. But yet you've had an encounter with an angel before, and then you knew this was an angel. But now you had a second encounter and you never knew. Then I guess our guess is so true that the being that Muhammad saw in the cave was not an angel. Definitely, it must be a demon. And another thing is that from the observation is when you notice Muslims will always agree that Muhammad is unlearned and he cannot read, neither can he write, which is what we are being taught. We are being told. And then when the angel comes and then he told him to read, and he said, "I cannot read." The first thing is this: didn't Allah and Gabriel or Jibril rather, didn't they know that this man they want to make or they want to forcefully turn to a prophet? Didn't they know that he cannot read? Look, I would be so happy if that statement was made. Then after on, Muhammad became could read miraculously. He began to read. He could read and write. That would justify the statement read. But even after the statement, Muhammad could still remain illiterate. That's number one. Number two is this: if the Muslim believe that the Quran was dictated to Muhammad verbally by Gabriel, but here we saw the first revelation being revealed to Muhammad, and he was compelled and forced to read. He was compelled and forced to read. So how then we have a problem? How then was the Quran revealed? Was it dictated to Muhammad verbally, or did Muhammad have to read from something? We don't understand, because now Muslims, your sources is confusing us. Just like Pastor Jason said, he said your sources cannot be trusted, and these are one of the reasons why your sources can't be trusted, because we have so many contradictory. Muhammad is an illiterate, then a God who claims to be omnipotent come and tell him, hey, read. And then even I myself thinking that uh if after he has been told to read miraculously, he can start reading, and then we go with the power of God, that God wants to use this man mightily. But this man could not read, and the man that could not read was forced to read something out of a plate. And then how then was the Quran revealed? You will say verbally, but this man was reading here. So that's why when people like when most Christian apologists, when they begin to tell you that Muhammad wasn't an illiterate, this verse, I mean, this passage is one of the passage that they used in saying your prophet wasn't an illiterate, because at some point in time you could read, while at some point in time you could not read. So I think your source is so confusing. I think that's my own observation.
Thank you, guys. Those were great points, guys. Really great points. But I just want to. Those are absolutely fantastic and key points in these revelations, these hadiths that we have. But I just want to just bring out, like I brought out before, like with the verses, and I just want to bring it out again. I did it with the hadith, but I just want to bring out some of these big points. Is when you just read it objectively without any agenda, you see that the Quran has an agenda and the hadith has an agenda, and the hadith want to justify Muhammad as a prophet given this revelation, so called. And the way it's justified is, hey, look, his wife confirms it. She says he's a good man because she was a businesswoman. This monk confirms it because he could read, he could translate the Gospels in Hebrew. So surely he knows what he's talking about when he's pointing to Muhammad. And then thirdly, hey, Muhammad's a true prophet because, hey, not only does his wife confirm it, not only does this monk confirm it, but hey, guess what? There's this emperor, Heraclius. He received a letter from Muhammad and he thought it was amazing. And he asked his companions about Muhammad and he thought Muhammad was amazing. So I just want us to keep that in mind, because maybe in the future you can develop that into some kind of apologetic and take something from it. But that's how these hadiths are coming across. This is why they're being written. They're being written to justify Muhammad as a prophet and his revelation. Now you guys have picked apart the detail of that, but I just wanted to get the big picture of why they're doing this, why they're mentioning these characters, which from our point of view, these, just because a guy gets his wife telling him he's a good man, just because a guy says that a monk says he's seen God or an angel, or that an emperor says that you're a good guy or you're a prophet, from the Bible's point of view, those are not the ways you discern who a prophet is. So that's just the observation there. So okay, so the next thing, so we've looked at the Quran, we've looked at the Hadith. Again, we've not had any agenda. We just looked at the Quran in its objectively. We looked at the Hadith objectively. We didn't edit the Hadith. We just read what it said, and then we picked it apart because that's the way it is. So now I just want to finish with maybe 20 minutes on scholarship, Islamic scholarship on and sources on the issue of the compilation of the Quran. So you have the Hadith, you have the Quran saying, I'm a revelation. You have the Hadith saying, this is how the revelation came through Muhammad. But how did we get the Quran? How was the Quran compiled early on? Well, what I did is I looked at two scholars and a Dawa guy, and trying to see what they say and come from their point of view first. I wanted to just see what the Muslims say. And the Christians use the same sources, but I just wanted to hear what the Muslims had to say. So I read some of a book called An Introduction to the Sciences of the Quran by Ahmed van Denver, Mohammed van Denver, and he talks about the Quran was collected by Abu Bakr. First of all, there were sticks, stones, and bones. There was the battle of there was this major battle, Battle of Yemen, and many people were dying who knew the Quran, so called, who could recite it, and there was concerns, and Abu Bakr said to Thabit, "We need to collect the Quran." The Quran was collected from sticks, stones, and bones. It was written down first of all on sticks, stones, and bones, and they wanted to collect it together. And then after Abu Bakr, there came Uthman, and Uthman, there was arguments about how you interpret the Quran, how do you recite the Quran, and then there was this collection of the Quran and one recitation, one Quran made, standard Quran, the rest were burnt. This is what he says in his book. But then I just want to mention some things that he thinks are important about the compilation of the Quran. He just mentions that there was, before the Quran, there was the Psalms, the Gospel, the sheets of Abraham, and the Torah in Surah 5, 47 to 48, Surah 21, 105, Surah 48, 29. He says the Quran is a criterion. In Surah 25, 1, it was sent down in Surah 26, 192. The Quran is a reminder. Surah 15, 9. The Quran is scripture. Surah 21, 10. And the Quran is to be memorized. Surah 98, 2. He notes that when the Quran was revealed, it was not collected in the time of Muhammad. He mentions that on page 16. So when, according to this Islamic scholar, when the Quran was given in bit by bit, it was not collected. It was just written on sticks, stones, and bones. He says that the Quran can't change in Surah 9:48. But why I thought this was interesting with this scholar, he mentions about Abu Bakr and Uthman, but he also mentions there were other Qurans. He mentions Ibn Masud had a copy of the Quran, which was different from Uthman's. He mentions that on page 65. And he quotes a scholar, Nadim, who lived around about 922 to 1021 AD. He says, I have seen a number of Quranic manuscripts which transcribers recorded as manuscripts of Ibn Masud. No two of the Quran copies were in agreement. And he notes there were the other Qurans as well as Uthman's that were different, such as Ibn bin Ka'b, 649 to 650 AD, which had two additional surahs, and Ibn Abbas, 658 AD, had two additional surahs. So he tells the traditional story of the Islamic scholarship about Abu Bakr collecting it and then Uthman. But he acknowledges there were these different Qurans. Masud had a different Quran, and there were others had different Qurans. But the way the Muslims deal with that, is they say, and I'm reporting what they say. They say, even though there were these different Qurans, they were actually revealed by Allah. Right? How you square that one, I don't know, but that's what they say. So this scholar's acknowledging there were different Qurans, but they were revealed by Allah and have been abrogated. So then the next one, I went from this scholar to a Muslim debater, Muslim Lantern. Now, most Muslims will not respect these Dawah guys. They don't respect them. And this is a scholarly presentation, and most of what I'm presenting is scholarly stuff. But I wanted to see what the guys on the ground were saying to the people in America and in the West. What are these guys saying that may be different from the scholars? And Muslim Lantern, he notes, which is what most scholars would say, the Quran was revealed over 23 years. And it was memorized by some key people: Zayd ibn Thabit, Osman bin Affan, Abu Bakr, Umar, ibn Kab. The reason why it's important he mentions this is for them. They see it as a proof that the Quran's been preserved because these guys were memorizing it. But it was also written on sticks, stones, and bones, says Muslim Lantern. He also mentions that some had books. But he says that there were different tribes. There was different Arabic tribes, the Quraysh, and about 5 other different tribes. I can't pronounce the names in Arabic, but the Huda, Ayel, and Hawazin, and other tribes, about 5 different tribes. And so Muhammad, he said, asked Allah, are there any different ways to recite the Quran? And according to Ibn Summa Abi Dawood 1478, it says that it talks about that Muhammad was revealed the 7 haruf. Now this is important in Islamic apologetics and Islamic scholarship, even though this is not a scholar. And the 7 haruf of the 7 different ways of reciting the Quran. And they give a verse in Surah 73, verse 30, which says, Surah 73, verse 30 says, recite the way you want. He notes that the last revelation of the Quran, he says, was given about how the order of the Quran should be. He then noticed that Abu Bakr compiled the Quran because of the Battle of Yemeni in Bukhari 4986. And Zayd ibn Thabit was asked by Abu Bakr to collect it. Zayd ibn Thabit was seen as one of the main guys of Muhammad, and he collected it. So he collected the Quran and he made a recension of the Quran. And then according to Muslim Lantern, there had to be 2 witnesses for 1 verse. If it's going to go in the Quran of Abu Bakr, Thabit said, I have to have 2 witnesses. There are other Islamic tradition that there was 1 surah that did not have 2 witnesses, but they say that particular person, he was so godly that he was worth 2 witnesses. But generally, they had 2 witnesses, according to Thabit. So you had 2 witnesses to put in the Quran that this is a Quranic verse. So then after Abu Bakr, there came a next thing, which was a standardization under Uthman. And Muslim Lantern said the oral tradition was spreading of these haruf, these different ways of pronouncing. And then it gets more complicated. Then you don't only have the haruf, i.e. the 7 ways of pronouncing according to Muslim Lantern, you have the Qurat. And the Qurat is your interpretation of the haruf. So you not only have the haruf, the 7 ways of pronouncing the Quran, you have the Qurat, which is the interpretation of the haruf. And you can mix your Qurat. You can mix, say, the Hafs recitation with the Warsh recitation and have a Qurat mixing the 2. And so what he's saying there, this is in Sahih Bukhari 4992, according to him. People were arguing over these pronunciations. This is what he's saying. And so Uthman made a standardized text so everybody could understand it in the Quraysh and burnt the Quran. The personal Qurans of Masood and others, because they were personal. That is according to Muslim Lantern. Most Muslims will not respect these guys, but they do listen to them. They don't respect them like the scholars. The scholars, you get your information from the scholars. You don't get it from people like Muslim Lantern. But I thought we'd look at two scholars, Islamic scholars, and Muslim Lantern, so we get a feel of what's happening in the scholarly mind and also on the ground of what they're saying to people. So that's what he's teaching. What he teaches Muslims, Muslim Lantern, and these Dawah guys, that's what they teach. They teach in order to get round the fact that there are different Qurans and there are different wordings, they bring in this issue of haruf and qiraat, so that there are 7 ways of pronouncing. So if there are 7 textual variants, you get out of it because you're saying there are 7 ways of pronouncing. And then you make it more complicated by saying you have the qiraat, which is the different ways of interpreting. And it makes it all complicated. And so anybody who sees a textual variant is blinded and thinks, oh, it's not a textual variant because it's the haruf or the qiraat. And then finally, I read a very scholarly work to see what, and it's called The History of the Quranic Text by Muhammad Mustafa Al-Azami, professor of Hadith at King's Saudi University. And basically, he focuses on trying to prove in the collection of Abu Bakr, in the time of Abu Bakr, because of the Battle of Yemeni, and people were dying and they wanted to preserve the Quran. He talks about Zayd bin Thabit and how amazing this guy was and how reliable he was. And he was also involved, Thabit was also involved in getting a committee in the time of Uthman. So he's trying to show that in his book, it's a very scholarly book, he's trying to show that there were people who witnessed each verse going in to the recension of the Quran in the time of Abu Bakr. He's saying that Thabit was so reliable, he was such a good guy, he memorized everything, and he double-checked everything in the time of Abu Bakr. And then he was asked to be the head of the committee in the time of Uthman, and I think there was 12 guys on that committee. So he's trying to prove that there were these committees, that they sat down and that they showed, they got witnesses to prove that what went into Uthmanic text was actually from Muhammad, etc. In these collections, in the time of Abu Bakr and in the time of Uthman, you get in, when they're making a recension of the Quran, when they're making a Quran, you have to realize nothing is properly organized. Nothing's properly organized. You get this, you get in both times, in Uthman's time and in Abu Bakr, that the Quran's on sticks, stones, and bones, and they're taking it from sticks, stones, and bones, and then they're taking it from Masud's manuscript, or they're taking a verse from here, from Aisha, or they're taking a verse from there, and nothing is properly organized. Everything's all over the place. Even in the time of Uthman, nothing is like written perfectly. And it's said in the Muslim scholars that the Abu Bakr's recension was not done properly in terms of the manuscript material. The manuscript material, some of it was big parchment, some of it was little parchment. It was not a very good recension according to that. So that's the scholar of the history of the Quran, Muhammad Mustafa Al-Azami, professor of Hadith at King Saudi University, focusing on committees, proving the Quran has been preserved through the committees of Zayd bin Thabit. And then finally, I just want to home in on some scholarship. In his book, The Oral and Written in Early Islam, Gregory Scholar, Routledge, 2006, he questions the reliability of these early sources and thinks that the text of the Quran is not fixed, page 34. In his book, The Genesis of Literature in Islam, Gregory Shoro, Edinburgh University, he says much of the Hadith and the Quran is formed because of the political issues of the time. There were Qurans found in Yemeni. Over 15,000 parchments were found in Yemeni. 1,000 of these parchments were different Qurans. Most of this scholarship has never been looked at. These Qurans have never been studied, only a small percentage. And one of them is the Sana manuscript. And in the Sana manuscript, Sana 1, we see that there are textual variants, that the story that we're being told by these Islamic scholars is not correct. Because when we look at the manuscripts show a different story. And I'd like Woody, please, to show a picture of the Sana manuscript. Now, if you see the Sana manuscript, we've listened to this story about the Aruf, the Qurat, about the committees from that scholar, and the admitting of the other scholar that there was other Qurans like the Masud text. And they tried to justify it as saying that that was the Quran, but it was abrogated. But if you look here, you can see the Sana manuscript. And under ultraviolet light, there are two manuscripts there. It was written over. So we have an older Quran before the Quran on top. And in the research called The Sana and the Origin of the Quran by Benham Sadi and Moshem Gordas at Stanford University, we see that there are, on page 8, there are textual variants. So I'll just give you one example. So in Surah 2192, the traditional text, that's the Uthmanic text, says, do not shave your heads until the offering reaches its destination. Notice, do not shave your heads. But Sana manuscript underneath has the word head missing. Do not shave until the offering reaches its destination. So that's a textual variant showing that all this story about the Haruf, the Qurat, and there were different Qurans, Masud, but they were actually revealed by Allah and they've been abrogated. It's not true. The fact is there are textual variants in the Quran. I looked at two other scholars that Muslims use to try and prove that the Quran has been preserved. One is Angelica Nguyen, and she has written a book called The Late Antiquity of the Quran. When you read her scholarship, when you look at her scholarship, she's not confirming the Quran at all. All her polemic is, all that she's about is talking about that the Quran is oral drama. So whenever the Muslims are quoting Angelica Nguyen, which they quote her all the time, you need to look at the context of whatever they're quoting, because she's not trying to confirm the Quran at all. She's saying that there's a lot of things we don't even know about the Quran. She has a particular agenda, which is to show that Western scholarship and Islamic scholarship do not really understand the Quran properly. That's her polemic. And then another scholar that Muslims quote is Nicola Sinai. And I listened to a lecture on his on the historical critical method when it comes to the Quran. What I noticed with him, the story that I just told you by the Islamic scholars, the two Islamic scholars, and also by Muslim Lantern, he accepts generally. Now, he doesn't accept it dogmatically. He just accepts it as a starting point. There's many details he doesn't agree with the Islamic perspective, nitty-gritty details, but the overall story he agrees, but he's not dogmatic on it. He's not like the Muslim story is 100% correct. He's just accepting it as a starting point, but he's willing to be corrected. So when Muslims quote him and say, oh, look, he agrees with us, the Quran's been preserved. No, he's just using it as a starting point because he just feels he has to have a starting point. But it doesn't mean to say that he actually believes it. Okay. So that's if we wanted to, we could put up Sam Shimon's article, and there, if people want to read it, you can read about the Battle of Yemeni You can read a little bit about Abu Bakr and Uthman, and he goes into a bit more detail about the different Qurans and the contradictions within the story of Abu Bakr and Uthman. So that's just a little bit of the Islamic scholarship, the Islamic polemics on the preservation of the Quran with Abu Bakr and Uthman, and then a little bit of the scholarship of what Western scholars think of the Islamic scholarship. I just want to say that in the scholarship of the Quran, the issue is the hadiths mainly, because the hadiths tell the story about the compilation of the Quran. You have about 20% of scholars that are what we call revisionists, and they think that the whole of the Quran story, the manuscripts, the hadith, it's all a load of nonsense because there's no historical information or background. So that's Patricia Crone. And Muslims say, oh, that they've been refuted now. No, that a lot of what the revisionists say are still on the table in the academic world. There's still a lot of stuff that Patricia Crone said and the scholars of the revisionist that has not been refuted and is still on the table in debates in academia today. The Muslim will say, oh, the revisionists have been refuted. No, they're still in the game. There's a lot of things that Patricia Crone brought up about, for example, Mecca. There's no information about early Mecca. These things are still on the table in the scholarly world. So 20% believe that all the hadith is just a load of nonsense. It was all created later, and there's no real historical background for the historical Muhammad and the Quran, etc. About 50% 60% of scholars in the academic world today are skeptical about Islamic sources. They are skeptical. They use the sources, but they are very, very skeptical. They don't really trust the sources, but they just use them anyway for academic discussion and debate. But they are extremely skeptical. And then the last 20 are the pro Muslim scholars who say, you can use the hadith to tell us about the Quran being preserved, and a few Western scholars with them who are often far left and being financed by Qatar. So that's my presentation, guys. So do you want to come in and say things or question things or?
That's pretty wonderful. When it comes to the compilation of the Quran, but at the same time, we see that Muhammad said to learn the Quran from 4 people. Learn the Quran from 4 people. Uthman was not mentioned. Zayd ibn Thabit was not mentioned. But even among the two was Abdullah ibn Masud and Ubay ibn Kab. And both of them could not agree on how many surahs should be in the Quran. So that's pretty much interesting when it comes to the perfect preservation of the Quran and actually study in depth on the Islamic sources to know what it actually says, whether or not the Quran was really perfectly preserved and so on. So that was observation to me.
Anybody else?
I was only here for like the last few 20 minutes of the presentation, so I don't know if I can say much.
Okay. Gareth, brother Gareth. Oh, if you go
I
ahead.
just want to say God bless everyone and hello while I'm here. Merry Christmas as well. And Happy New Year's.
You too, bud.
You too. Brother Gareth, Line, Dance, Apologetics. Welcome to the panel.
Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, Gus. You okay, buddy?
Yeah, I was just listening to your presentation. I just wanted to ask, what does everybody think about when Abbas from EFDOA used to say Speaker's Corner and on his platform that Angelica Newworth says when it comes to the preservation of the manuscripts and the accuracy that the debate is finished and it's over, but I've never seen any proof and evidence of these claims. I was wondering if anybody else can, give any, response to that.
Well, I listened to a full lecture of hers and then looked at her book, and it's got to be a misquotation because they're not quoting it right, because she's not in any shape or form on the Islamic. She makes it clear she doesn't agree with Islamic scholarship or Western scholarship. She's got her own furrow that she's trying to do. Her project is she believes that the Quran is that we don't know what the Quran's about. When we read the Quran, we don't know the context of each surah. And her project is to try and map out sources before the Quran, like Syriac stories, Bible stories, Jewish stories, and use them as an underpinning to try and understand the Quran. So that's where she's coming from. She's not coming in any shape or form trying to confirm the text of the Quran. That's her agenda. So they're misquoting her, they're misrepresenting her scholarship. Her scholarship.
Yeah, I mean, you could be right, Joe. I mean, because he's never referenced any YouTube channel videos, or he's never shown any academic papers. He's never given any links. He's never posted anything on the internet. That's 100% true. He's never referenced any books or anything like that.
And the other thing as well is the dating of the Quran, like the Sana manuscript. That in dating the Quran, you have what is called the middle date. It's called the bell curve. So when say you date the Quran, a Quranic manuscript, say, just for argument's sake, just say you've got a manuscript, say 700 AD to 800 AD, right? And you've got these dates of, say, 5 universities dating the Quran from 700 AD to 800 AD. It's earlier, but I'm just saying, just to make it easier. So what scholars do, if they've got this, they do the dating of a Quran, and the dates come from 4 universities. Some say 700 AD, some say 800 AD. What they do, they call it the bell curve. They get the middle date, right? So when you get the bell curve of the date for the earliest Quran, sometimes the Quran exists before Muhammad, the time of the Muhammad, and way after Muhammad. So the bell curve's all over the place, but some scholars can use it and say, oh, look, the Quran's early. It was in the time of Muhammad. But they don't tell you, well, if you want to go for that bell curve, there's another bell curve that says the Quran existed before Muhammad. So how do you work that one out? And then there's another bell curve that says, of the same manuscript, that says it was way after Muhammad. So they just pick the bit that they might use, and maybe she's picking up on that a bit. But generally, her scholarship is mainly focused on this agenda of getting looking at literature before the Quran and how it fits into the Quran.
I've got something interesting here. It says the textual integrity about from Angelica Newworth, what she does. Her research on the Meccan surahs uses microscopic philological analysis to demonstrate the poetical homogeneity, the internally consistent image matrix, and extensive textual integrity of the Quran, countering revisionist theories that the text is a later haphazard compilation by many different authors. And then you've got the Uthmanic recension. Newworth acknowledges the traditional Islamic account and an authoritative final version, the Uthmanic Codex, was compiled under the third Caliph Uthman ibn Affan, which established a fixed order of surahs, and she notes that the committee remained committed to the textual material, whose authenticity was supported by the reliable oral and written traditions. So then she also uses the manuscript evidence which is like a non-revisionist approach. The dates from the mid-7th century, finding supportive early manuscripts like the Birmingham manuscript. So it's like, so they use that to try and match the standardized version. So then they also use the historical context as well, which I like a lot as well. So I think the Muslims have got a bit of a problem, if they can't go to those sources. For example, all they get is these kind of opinions by people like Ijaz and the other guys on EF Tower and anybody at the park. So that's why they end up going around in circles, because they're not using all these kind of methods. And then they're going back to, like, for example, I use I think it's called the chronological approach, like where you go back to the beginning. But I mean, they don't have anybody they can access who can take them to these manuscripts and actually read them properly. Because if they go to somebody they know in their circle who you might be able to, claim that he reads the Arabic. I mean, most of them can't even read it anyway, so I don't know how they're going to defend those arguments that they're using.
Yeah, I mean, these scholars, some of these scholars like Nicholas Sinai and others, they'll take the general story, but as you taught all that language about intertextuality, when you look at this woman, that's all she's about, and actually, if you would follow what she's saying, it would actually contradict what she's actually saying, because she's actually saying she on 1 minute she's saying that this Uthman manuscript has been done, but what she's actually saying is that if Muslims listen to what she's saying, she's not saying the Quran's a revealed book from God. She's saying that there's these other sources that have come into the Quran from the Bible, from the Syriac language, from Jewish stories. She's saying that kind of thing. That's her agenda. So you can't really use her to buttress your point of view up about the Quran's been preserved. So any other questions or thoughts? Thanks, Gareth. It was a bit deep with the Aruf and the Quran, but this is the way they present things to try and get out of textual variants. They try to get out of the fact there are different Qurans by saying there are 7 Haruf, 7 ways of pronouncing, like the halves of the wash, and then they make it complicated, called the Qur'an, where you interpret the Quran, and that's another science in itself. And so they get out of this, there are different Qurans, there are different textual variants, but it's not, because the 7 Haruf been revealed by Allah to Muhammad. But there's no example anywhere where Muhammad it says he was given 7 Haruf, or 7 ways of pronouncing it, but there's no example of what those 7 ways are. There's no example of Allah or Gabriel showing Muhammad these 7 ways of pronouncing the Quran. There's no example at all. So they don't really know what that is.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yeah.
With the issue of the Quran having textual variants and things like that, would you say that it's similar to how we have textual variants in the Bible, or is it worse for Islam than for what we have in the Bible?
I think it's worse. And the reason why it's worse is because theirs is a controlled text. It's political. So, like as Woody mentioned early on, there was, and you can read it in Sam Shimon's article. I didn't. If you notice my talk, I didn't go too much into detail in criticizing these scholars or criticizing their sources when it came to Abu Bakr and Uthman. I didn't go into that. If you want to go into that more detail, you can use Sam Shimon's article. I just wanted to come at it from a scholarly point of view and just see what they're saying. Now, if we just go from what they're saying, from the scholars that I quoted, the 2 Muslim scholars, they admit that there were different Qurans, but they say that these were revealed and then they were abrogated. So what we're seeing then is there were textual variants, but they're getting rid of them. Whereas in Christianity, you didn't have like one person controlling, or one king or one leader controlling how the manuscripts are developed. You know, you had people translating them in Antioch, in Alexandria, in Gaul or France, in Turkey. So no one person could control how the Bible was being copied. So it's an honest it's an honest it's an open book. We can see if there was anybody who made an accident or made a mistake. We can see in the text. Whereas with these, they tried to get rid of evidence, and so you can see in the tradition that there's been this political maneuvering to try and control what the text is. So it's a lot worse because they don't really know, really, ultimately, what their Quran is, because it's been politically doctored. You know, you often hear atheists say, "Oh, you can't trust the Bible because the Vatican has manipulated it." Well, you could say in a way you can't trust the Quran because Abu Bakr and Uthman doctored it. It's not the original. You could say that. I hope that answers your question, bro. So it's been more controlled and politicized. The textual variants are more political.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because I mean, me personally, as a Christian, I wouldn't say a variant in and of itself is an issue, but when you take into account how the Quran was controlled in its compilation and in its preservation, that creates problems with the variants more so than with the Bible, where we have the manuscripts arising in different independent locations, and so we can identify, for example, when where there would be an scribe error or whatever. So yeah, I think that answers this question.
Thanks, bro. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful presentation. I really appreciate that. Thanks for coming out, give us this presentation. And for those who may not know, our brother Pastor Jason Burns, he also have a YouTube channel as well. I'll put it up. It's called Africa Without Borders. So that's his channel. You can go out and subscribe. And he does a lot of teaching. He's a pastor. He does a lot of teaching sessions, Bible study, exegesis, getting into history, reliability of the Bible, doing apologetics course, reviewing Speaker's Corner, and he
Nice.
does much more. And he does a lot of debates with Muslims. So do check out his channel, and you will learn a lot and be able to be helpful when it comes to teaching, getting sound theology, and he does a lot of recommendation of books and resources in order to get your faith solid and sound, and also be able to defend your faith with confidence. So that's a channel and wonderful. Thanks for joining again. And Christian apologetics. If you want to say anything, the floor is
Oh, one
yours.
more thing. One more thing. This is the Reformed pastor, right?
Yeah, he's reformed pastor.
Oh yeah, let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
What type of what type of reform are you? Are you like a Calvinistic reformed?
I'm Reformed Baptist, bro, really. 1689.
Oh yes.
Nice.
That's awesome.
we have some reform.
1689, Dr. Martin Lloyd Jones, John Calvin's Institutes, the Puritans, Joe Beakey, all that.
That's great.
But I just want to say thank you, buddy. Thank you, Christian Apologetic Network. Thank you so much. I hope it wasn't too complicated at the end, but I just wanted to present what they say. I tried not to be too critical of them, just to let us look at their thinking, their sources, and then critique it at the end. That's what I tried to do, rather than just go into it. Like Sam Shimon, if you want to go into detail in detailed critique, you can read Sam Shimon. What I wanted to do is just present the material and the way they think, and then we can take it from there. That's what I wanted to do.
Wonderful. I've shared the link down if you want to look at it. Sam Shimon. And floor is yours, Christian Apologetics. If you want to add anything. If you're speaking, you're muting Christian Apologetics.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was a fantastic presentation, an eye-opening, and thank you, Pastor Jason Burns, for honoring the invitation. We are so honored, and God bless you. Yeah, I think the viewers got a lot of information, and you just have to build on what Pastor Jesus have talked about. Then, like this article that ECM Apologetics shared, you can go check them out to learn more about this subject. It's a very important. It's very important for you as Christians to understand this, because when Muslim comes and tell you the Quran is properly preserved, then you can tell them with evidence that that's the trash. All right. Thank you, sir, for honoring the invitation. We really appreciate you. I think that's our time for today's live stream. Okay, folks, like Woody said, Pastor Jason has a YouTube channel, African Without Borders. I'm going to be putting every of the links that Pastor Jason used. I'm going to get them from ETM Apologetics. I'm going to include them in this video. Then I'm going to be including Pastor Jason's YouTube channel also, the link also right in this video in the description. So you can just go ahead and subscribe and then follow him and support his ministry in whatever way you can. Yeah. Through that, we are spreading the gospel, especially to Africa. As you all know, I'm also an African. So I'm a fan of what Pastor Jason is doing. So thank you, Pastor, for coming. God bless you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. No
From
surrender. Keep going.
yes, yes, sir.
Keep
Yes,
fighting for
thank
the
you, sir.
truth, man.
Yeah. All right, folks. Bye. Bye from myself, Young Christian Thought, Ready to Reason, ETM Apologetics. We say bye bye until next week. Take care.
God bless everyone. Goodbye.